Hey guys, Big Game James here with the Fantasy Basketball Podcast, coming to you on a Monday. We're going to be looking at a Week 1 wrap-up. Going to be focusing on streamers for Week 2. Just want to remind you that our main show is every Thursday. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. We're going to be doing these episodes on Mondays. Essentially, they're just going to be recaps and kind of get you geared up for the upcoming week. And anytime news breaks, if we have, big injury, big trade, look for us to upload an episode. So make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcast, whether that's on Podstar, Podbean, Pod, you name it, Peas in a Pod, wherever you get your podcast. If you like what you hear, do us a favor, leave us a comment, give us a 5-star review. It truly does help the show. We try to be as interactive with our community as we can. Really liking what we're getting so far. We got some loyal fans already from all over the world, which that's the exciting part. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at @the_FB pod. You can also get us on that same handle on Instagram, @the_FB pod. You can also find us on Facebook as well. But what these Monday episodes are essentially looking to be is just a recap of the previous week. Some surprises, some things that we didn't expect. Any injuries, anything that, kind of out of the blue that we want to make sure that we touch base as we lead into the upcoming week. So right out of the gate, bringing basketball back, you don't realize how much you love the sport until it's gone. And then when it comes back, it's just been fast and furious right out of the gate. Have the NBA League Pass. I live on my couch and I'm fine with it. And I plan on doing that throughout the winter months. But big surprises right out of the gate. Philadelphia 0-3 start. Looking to be a powerhouse in the East. Definitely tripping over their feet in the beginning. There are some good things from a statistical standpoint. Joel Embiid still giving you, good categorical numbers from a fantasy stat perspective. James Harden's looking fantastic as well. Record-wise, though, they really need to get their ship together because Doc Rivers is running this offense in the same manner that they ran it last year, and it just wasn't successful. So any Philadelphia fans out there that have high aspirations, there's going to need to be a change, or there's going to need to be a change. And that means either the offense needs to look different or potentially their coaching staff needs to look different. I'm a big fan of Sam Cassell. I hope he gets an opportunity to step in there if that happens. But again, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Staying in the Eastern Conference, the Charlotte Hornets, they look to be on the race to Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson. They are 2-1. This is a feisty group. They're kind of holding down the fort until LaMelo comes back. I got an opportunity to watch 2 halves of basketball, 2 of their games. I like the way they move. They're playing with high energy. Kelly Oubre Jr. is one of those guys that, from a fantasy standpoint, you want to have him on your roster. From a real-life standpoint, I would imagine he's a headache. But from just strictly fantasy, Terry Rozier is doing exactly what we said he was going to do. He's really, really stepping up in the absence of ball. So much so that there's grumblings that the Lakers are looking to maybe, kind of feast on the fact that Charlotte ultimately won't end up being a playoff team and seeing what they can do. Let's head over to the West, where the Utah Jazz, no one saw this coming. A group of guys who were coming out there playing with heart, with a chip on their shoulder, improved to 3-0 out of the gate. Kelly Olynyk looking like an All-NBA first-teamer. Just kidding. But in all seriousness, the big statistical takeaway from here is Lauri Markkanen's been fantastic from a fantasy perspective right out of the gate, while Colin Sexton surprisingly is getting anywhere from 19 to 21 minutes, which is definitely not what fantasy owners were expecting, myself included, who ended up taking Sexton hoping that he would really be given a green light. And for the most part, when he's in, he is, he's able to kind of do what he wants out there. It's just they're really, really showcasing Mike Conley, which leads me to believe that there's a trade somewhere down the line, because I just can't see them doing dirty by Mike to keep him on a roster that really has no real direction. And I know Danny Ainge is not looking to fight for a playoff spot. So look for them to make a move with Mike Conley, get him to a contender before the end of the season. If that's the case, anybody who dumps Colin Sexton early on, you may end up regretting it. I'm going to hold on to him a little bit longer personally. I like what I'm seeing out of Jared Vanderbilt. He's on my roster as well. Walker Kessler. Defensively, this guy he was the defensive collegiate player of the year last year. He's showing some of those flashes. I really like what I'm seeing from him. He had some really, really good like defense around the paint on Zion and Jonas Valanciunas last night when they upset the Pelicans. The Portland Trailblazers 3-0. I am not going to jump on the wagon just yet. Each of their wins have been ones where they had to pull it out late in games. The difference between this Blazers team versus last year's Blazers team is they usually dug themselves a hole. And this is Blazer teams in the past. They dig themselves a hole by, 12, 13, 18 points, and then they rally back and make it a close game, and then it's close in the fourth quarter at the buzzer, and then Dame has to go to Dame time. The difference here is in some of these games, they've actually had the lead, and then they've let it slip away, and then they're fighting to maintain the lead. So I'd be curious to see which trend prevails as we get through the season. As a Blazer fan, being in the Northwest, I'm excited. Dame looks great. Anthony Simons looks great. Jeremy Grant looks great so far. From a statistical standpoint, Dame is really gets the lion's share of the fantasy stats. Anthony Simons has regressed like we kind of thought he would going up against first team defenses, but I like what I see out of Portland. The same can't be said from the Los Angeles Lakers. LeBron James, I took him on the flip side of my draft, so that was the 14th pick. I couldn't leave him on the table. From a fantasy perspective, he's having a fantastic season so far. The team just looks horrible. And it's easy to let Russell Westbrook be the scapegoat on this. He doesn't look engaged in there, and I think he's not engaged in there because I think he can tell that nobody wants him to be there. I mean, and that's from the top down. That's you have Darvin Ham saying that we don't have time for people to be on their feelings anymore. Nothing that LeBron James says is done without there being some calculation behind it. So when he makes subtle comments about the shooting, obviously there is a dagger that's going towards Russ, who has been abysmal so far from behind the 3-point line. So much so that when they played Portland, they had Yusuf Nurkic guarding him in just the ultimate sign of disrespect there. So it's easy to say that a change is imminent for the Lakers. If I'm Indiana, I realize that they're going to be desperate. So I'm taking them to the absolute cleaner. So it's going to be a war of attrition between the Lakers front office and somebody like Indiana, which even if you proceed with the trade that was talked about, bringing Buddy Hield, Miles Turner in for Russell Westbrook and their 2 draft picks, that doesn't fix the issues that you have in LA, because Miles Turner, while he takes some of the pressure off of AD's playing fantastic. I know he doesn't want to be a 5. The sooner he just kind of accepts that from a fantasy standpoint, he did have the scare when he landed and kind of tweaked his back a little bit. That was a very hard fall, but he's playing fantastically from a statistical standpoint, but Buddy Hield is not going to solve their shooting issues. So if I'm the Lakers and I sit back and I say, at what point do I realize that we kind of dug ourselves a hole that we can't, it's not a quick fix, and Russell Westbrook isn't the asset to get us out of it. And in addition to that, you're sitting there, if you're the New Orleans Pelicans, and you're salivating because they have a pick swap with the Lakers this season. So if the Lakers end up just torpedoing, could you imagine a lineup with CJ McCollum? This is over in New Orleans. CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas, Zion. Herb Jones is playing fantastic defensively. They don't need anything from him offensively. Oh, and by the way, you have a lottery pick. And if for some crazy reason that ball drops, if that ping pong ball drops and they get the first or second pick, look out. I mean, I can't put money on the Pelicans fast enough. So anyway, just something to keep an eye out on. The last one, as far as records that were surprising, Sacramento 0-3 start right out of the gate. This is the team that has a lot of talent. This season leading into it, Sacramento was the fan favorite to kind of supersede Portland, for instance, and move into that Western Conference playoff hunt, that 9-10 play-in game hunt. Breaking now the new record for longest professional squad without a playoff appearance. The Seattle Mariners originally held that, but made it to the playoffs this season. So now it's kind of on the Sacramento Kings. I'm not saying that this is a heavy burden for them to drag. There's definitely talent on this club. De'Aaron Fox is playing fantastic from a fantasy standpoint. I do think Keegan Murray's going to take a little bit longer in the regular season to come along than some of the other rookies. And like I said, I just think it looks a little bit, it's not as easy for him playing against NBA players as it was in Summer League, which is a fantastic transition into some of the rookies that just are flourishing. So if you look at the antithesis of that, somebody who's coming in right out of the gate, Paolo Banchero, Jaden Ivey, and Benedict Mathurin, these are men who are ready for the NBA. They have zero fear. They step right in right out of the gate, and they all look fantastic. And each of their teams is going to be better because of it. So keep an eye on Orlando, Detroit, and Indiana. It's easy to write them off, especially in a season where you have a lot of teams that are going to consider tanking for potentially a transcendent talent. These three clubs have guys that should be serviceable, potential All-NBA type players in short order, and they're on their squads already. Banchero starts out on fire, 23.3 points, 8.7 rebounds, 3.3 assists in week 1. Zero fear. I was watching him, the way he moves, none of his shots seem forced. He was able to shake defenders. Size, he's so big. I'm surprised at how big he looks out there. Jaden Ivey, defensively, is an absolute pit bull. Him and Cade Cunningham are going to be a fun backcourt. And I don't think that the Detroit experiment, or just kind of sitting on the sidelines and not making the playoffs, I don't think it's going to be acceptable for this Detroit team. I like what Dwayne Casey's doing there, kind of moving Cade Cunningham off, allowing him to be the primary offensive weapon, while Jaden Ivey is the guy who his responsibility is to go down and shut down the opposing team's best guard. I love it. It looks like he loves it. 17.7 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. And then Benedict Mathurin over in Indiana, the question really was, with Buddy Hield potentially on the block, Miles Turner, he hasn't played yet, had an unfortunate incident where he landed on a ball boy's foot and rolled his ankle. But what other scoring options were they going to have? Well, that was quickly, put to bed with Benedict Mathurin. This is a guy who I think, in watching him play in the first 3 games, has the ultimate chip on his shoulder. I'll be truthful. I didn't know much about him leading into the draft. I had to do some research. I really just wanted to see him play against NBA bodies. Guys can look decent in summer league, and it means really nothing. Benedict Mathurin is the absolute, I dare you to bet on me. He reminds me a lot, surprisingly. He reminds me a lot of Ron Artest, a young Ron Artest. Very offensively capable, willing to get in there defensively, not afraid of taking last-minute shots. He took a last-minute shot 2 evenings ago, and that's a lot of trust that Rick Carlisle's putting in a rookie when you got a guy, Tyrese Halliburton, leading your squad. So I'm excited for these rookies. I'm excited to see what they do from a fantasy standpoint, if you were fortunate enough to get them, especially in a kind of a keeper draft. Especially Benedict Mathurin is probably going to be the biggest steal of that group, and when I'm looking at the projections for Rookie of the Year, my money is going to be on Benedict Mathurin, just because the payout is going to be a little bit better. Banchero should walk away with it pending injury, but it's going to be exciting to watch these guys. So our next segment's going to essentially just be a 30-team rundown, one take, less than 5 seconds. I'm going to go down the list of each of the teams, and from week 1, what are my takeaways? Feel free to kind of light me up in the comments on this, or hit me up on Twitter if there's something that you see differently. But less talk and more action. Let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks. So far, the 2-guard experiment has been a success. I didn't think it would. They've proved me wrong up to this point. Boston, Tatum is firing on all cylinders. Absolutely watch for him to get a lot of push for MVP. Both sides of the ball, defensively and offensively. He just is taking his game up 2 steps. Brooklyn, Simmons still doesn't want to shoot. And that's going to be a real problem moving down the line. And the guy can't stay out of foul trouble. And being one of your only bigs on this roster, Brooklyn's very small. Brooklyn's going to need to address that sometime in the near future. Charlotte, holding down the fort until LaMelo returns. Scary Terry's looking fantastic, but I don't know if he is going to be suited in that Charlotte Hornet jersey for much longer. Looks like a couple teams are looking to pry him away. Chicago, Zach LaVine's knee could really make or break their season and potentially this team. If something happens where inflammation or extended rest needs to come on the shoulders of LaVine, that could really be something where the organization looks at the DeRozan situation and says, this might be our time to move and rebuild. If that's the case and you're moving DeRozan, you might as well move Vucevic and give it a full restart. So definitely keep an eye on Levine's knee. Cleveland, they definitely need a starting small forward that isn't named Karis LeVert. It just isn't working. And I think the testament to the importance of Darius Garland with him being out with that eye laceration. Donovan Mitchell's been great, but they really need to address that three. Dallas, Christian Wood needs to be a starter, period. I don't have much else to say there. He's been fantastic from a fantasy perspective. Denver, Michael Porter Jr. is teasing us again. If you have Michael Porter Jr. stock, you might want to look to sell it. I'm definitely not going to buy in on this. I don't trust him. He hasn't given me any reason to trust him in the past. It's exciting to see him live up to his potential a little bit, but he's done this before. He gets us excited only to break our heart again. So if you're a guy who's not, in love with Michael Porter Jr. and he's on your roster, this might be a sell high opportunity. Detroit, Ivy's going to be an all defensive caliber player. If you're in a keeper league, you're in good shape if you've got Jaden Ivey. I love everything he brings. Golden State Warriors, Moses Moody needs more rotational minutes, especially with how they're structured. The regular season record isn't going to matter to them. They need to get Moody more involved. Houston, the Sengun project has really fallen off the radar. There's no explanation for it. I know he was overdrafted in a lot of leagues, and some of the owners are very frustrated at this point. I will tell you that I'm not cutting him yet. If I'm you, I would hold on. I think it's just a matter of time. Houston came out of the gate. They're 0-3. They don't have anything to play for this year. They will be scary in the future, but I definitely hold on to Sengun just a little bit longer. Indiana, don't tell Benedict Mathurin that the Pacers are in tank mode. This guy is definitely not looking to lose games, and as far as he's concerned, why would you need a Victor Wembanyama and a Scoot Henderson when you have me? In some ways, again, he reminds me a lot of Ron Artest. The kid's going to be scary. Definitely going to be a fantasy workhorse in the future. LA Clippers. Kawhi is made of glass and evidently has no intention of really giving you any value during the regular season. So he may be somebody that you look to package to someone else in your league that isn't necessarily as savvy to his background and his history. And ultimately, I think Zubac is going to be the key to the Clippers' success this season. He's started off on fire from a fantasy perspective, especially if you're in a double-double multiplier. He had 17 rebounds the other night. So definitely look to jump on that Zubac train. Los Angeles Lakers, the Westbrook saga is just getting started because they're in a real pickle. The worse he plays, the less bargaining power they have, and those picks just don't look. They look great to a team, but they don't look great to an imminent team. So, like I said, I think this might be something that extends throughout the season, and I can't see that being good for Westbrook or the Lakers. Memphis, I don't think Jaw's going to be able to walk when he's 45. The guy just plays like an absolute animal. I saw a comparison the other day, which was spot on. He reminds me a lot of Derrick Rose in his second season. My fear is that he reminds me a lot of Derrick Rose in his second season. We all know the story of that. I would hate to see that happen, but I think if you were to ask Ja Morant, if you knew that you would get injured playing the way that you play, would you stop playing as hard as you play? And I think that emphatically he would never let me finish that sentence before he would tell me that he wouldn't change a thing. So from a fantasy perspective, he's absolutely been gold. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute, but I don't know. It just scares me every time he goes to the rack. Miami, they look old out of the gate. Lowry, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo was hitting threes all preseason long, and now he just looks, I don't know, he seems timid. He's afraid to let it go. I think there's some underlying problems going on in Indiana or in Miami you might want to keep an eye on. We talked about this on the last episode. Nikola Jovic, I see a scenario where he's going to get his card here pretty quick. The minute he gets in the rotation, I think look out. Maybe not pick him up off the wire now, but it's not going to be too long until you see him start creeping his way into the rotation. Milwaukee Bucks, they are in cruise control, especially until Middleton and Connaughton come back. I don't think there's any worry. Bud knows what he has with this group. Giannis is playing fantastic from a statistical standpoint, fantasy standpoint, and real standpoint. So, this is a team that I don't think is concerned about their seeding, even if it's, if they don't have home court in the playoffs. I think they're confident with what they have and what they're bringing back. So Milwaukee's going to be fine. Minnesota, Gobert, he's going to have top 10 fantasy value this season. I have no doubt. The guy is just a rebounding magnet. All of his shots are going to be easy putbacks around the basket, so his field goal percentages are going to be through the roof. And I think that 18 to 20 points isn't unrealistic the way that this offense is set up with Cat being so far away from the basket. So I'm going on a limb and saying that Gobert at the end of the year will have top 10 fantasy value. The New Orleans Pelicans, they are absolutely scary offensively, but defensively, they have a lot to work on if they want to be a serious contender. We want to keep an eye on Zion Williamson. Has a contusion of his hip right above his butt. Want to keep an eye on that. That's a lot of his explosiveness. New York Knicks, there's definitely nothing blown up yet, so I guess that's a good thing. They've just been kind of meh to me. I haven't really seen anything that's got me excited, but on the same token, I'm not sitting there selling my New York Knicks stock just yet. So, and from a fantasy standpoint, nobody's really blown me away. Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, they really haven't moved the needle. It's just been kind of a collective effort so far this season. OKC, this is a red flag alert for me. The injury bug is hitting them early. SGA is already injured. Josh Giddey rolled his ankle. Poku's been benched. That one was a shock to me considering, we're kind of at the race to the bottom. I don't know that I feel great about what's happening in OKC, which means that it could get really, really bad really, really quick. So if you have man stock, definitely stay on that. If you have Giddey stock, you may want to have him come back, let him get some good games in. That might be something you're looking to sell high. SGA, kind of the same thing. They started out of the gate pretty rough. So if this is something that is prolonged, SGA might be somebody you want to move before they end up having the conversation about shutting him down. Because look, they're not contending for a playoff spot. I think if they can get one more year, SGA is under contract. They kind of know what the program and the process is here in OKC and what they're trying to accomplish. So I could see them shutting down Giddey for back-to-backs and SGA later in the season, just under the umbrella of nagging injuries. So keep an eye on that. Where are we at? Orlando. They're definitely building something in Orlando. I like what I see so far. Jalen Suggs needs to kind of shake the injury bug. He's had a couple of them right out of the gate. Banchero's going to be fantastic. Again, keep an eye on Mo Bamba. I think he's sneaky. He could work his way into the rotation, getting some more minutes, closer to that 20 to 25 here in the next couple of weeks. He brings definitely a different element with his size. So keep an eye on Orlando. Philadelphia, not time to panic just yet, but Doc better start updating his resume. I'm telling you, the offense just looks stagnant. I saw a statistic where James Harden had 538 dribbles in game one versus the Celtics. The rest of the Philadelphia 76ers had 411 dribbles total. I trust the ball in James Harden's hands. The problem is when other people sit and watch as opposed to move, that offense gets really, really stagnant. It leads to a lot of one-on-ones and ISOs. I don't think James has the explosive ability to get around guys anymore, and that's a lot of workload on Joel Embiid with his back to the basket. So I think they need to address Tyrese Maxey being their second best player. They need to look to get him more touches and to kind of free him up. So in order for them to be successful, they're going to need to make some changes. Phoenix, it's going to be absolutely necessary for Ayton to take over as the secondary offensive guy in Phoenix. You can see in game one, Phoenix didn't even finish the game with Chris Paul. And Chris he's a different 37-year-old player than LeBron is. And it's unfair that these two guys are so joined at the hip, in years in the league and their friendship. They're so different. And when you see the things that LeBron can do, it's disingenuous to think that Chris is going to be able to give you something like that. And for all intents and purposes, Chris Paul is still going to be flirting with the assist title at the end of this season. And this is at 37 years old. So, like I said, defensively, I think there's a definite liability there. I think Aiden needs to kind of step in and just say, I'm taking it. I'm not waiting for it to get handed to me. And left to his own devices, I think he would end up waiting. Portland, Dame has definitely not lost a step. The guy, we knew he was going to have a chip on his shoulder coming in. He's been preaching in each of the post-game shows of the 3 games that they've won that this is about trust. The season's about trust. You had Anthony Simons, who had the big game winner in game 2. You had Jeremy Grant that had the game-winning shot against the Lakers. So, Dame trusts this squad. I don't know what that means from a season standpoint, but I think Dame is looking to, kind of stick it to guys who wrote him off. And from a fantasy standpoint, I still think he's going to have top 10 value. So he'll be a top 10 fantasy player this year. Sacramento, the talent doesn't supersede the culture. And the culture right now in Sacramento has been one of losing. They need to learn how to win again. They definitely have the talent on the roster. Keegan Murray is going to get an opportunity to kind of come up big. It just hasn't started right out of the gate. But they need to learn how to win and not blow leads. San Antonio Spurs, they may not win, but damn, they're going to be competitive in every game all season. I don't think Popovich is out there looking to roll over. So this is going to be a competitive club. They're going to give other teams headaches. They're going to force other teams to, which is good from a fantasy standpoint because you won't necessarily be able to run out your second units if you're trying to play for position in an Eastern and Western Conference where seeding is vital. The Toronto Raptors, Scotty Barnes, who didn't realize how important he was until he gets injured, and then the team just doesn't look the same without him on the floor. So that's a big deal. Chris Boucher, I don't know. I don't know what to think about his injury. I'm more or less selfishly frustrated because he's on my squad. They need to get healthy, and this is a squad that could easily drop from 4th to 7th, 8th in the East if Scotty Barnes ends up having anything nagging that where he misses extensive time. The Utah Jazz, Colin Sexton's not going to get a break from a fantasy standpoint until they move Mike Conley. I know a lot of guys they bought Sexton low looking for a big payout. I'm telling you and I'm urging you right now, hold on to Sexton. It's just a matter of time before he gets the run that you're looking for. And anybody who took a flyer out on Lauri Markkanen in high rounds, congratulations to you because he's absolutely killing it. And then Washington, I got Kyle Kuzma having an opportunity to be league's most improved player. He's playing fantastic right now. He says he's playing with energy and he's enjoying his teammates, which he couldn't say in the past. So he's been banger out of the gate from a fantasy standpoint. So, keep an eye on him. He might be somebody that you can snag for a relatively good deal on the trade wire. So I don't know if you can get him for a good deal. I'd go grab Kuzma because I think he's got to have a breakout for the second half of the season, especially if anything happens to Kristaps Porzingis, which we all know there's a high probability. So moving on to the fantasy weekly recap for week 1. So these are the top performances from a statistical standpoint in the league. So for week 1, the high point total was John Morant. He had 49. High rebound total is Rudy Gobert, had 23. From the assists category, Trae Young hit 13 assists twice, while Nikola Jokic hit 13 assists once. From a steals perspective, Tyrese Halliburton, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, and DeJounte Murray all had 5 in a game, while from a blocks perspective, Isaiah Jackson, Brook Lopez, and Zubac had 5. Your top fantasy producers for week 1, Steph Curry at 59.35. So how this is calculated, essentially, is we take your field goal percentage, you multiply it by 1. You take your free throw percentage, you multiply it by 1. You take the number of three-pointers made. Okay, so you're adding all these up if you're wanting to do this on a spreadsheet. So I'll go over this again. So you take your field goal percentage, you multiply it by 1. And then you add that to your free throw percentage multiplied by 1. And then you add that to your three-pointers made. You add that to your points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, steals per game, blocks per game. And then you subtract your turnovers per game. So when you do that calculation, it comes up, here's our top 15 fantasy producers. So we got Steph Curry at 59.35, Jason Tatum at 56.13. So that's a pretty good discrepancy there. The three-pointers are really what helps Steph in that category. Donovan Mitchell, 55.97. Again, keep in mind that Darius Garland has been out the last 2 games. You got Luka Doncic at 55.93, Giannis at 54.26, Damian Lillard at 53.68, LeBron James at 52.2, De'Aaron Fox at 51.7, James Harden at 51.68, John Morant at 51.36, Devin Booker at 49.74, Pascal Siakam at 48.17. You got Tyrese Halliburton and Nikola Jokic. So this is surprising to a lot of people who took Jokic first. 46.88. They're tied there. And then you have Trae Young at 46.61. So the shocker is really Nikola. The question was going to be, with as much firepower as he had coming back this season, Was his offensive productivity going to stay the same? He's still having monster nights. And if you're in a multiplier league, not just a traditional 9-cat, he's probably going to be higher ranked. Again, my statistics are just on a 9-cat category. So I see a lot of these pending transactions where, should I move Jokic? Should I move Jokic? Should I move? Absolutely not. If you're moving Jokic, like stop playing fantasy basketball. We need to be a little bit more patient and not look to overhaul our roster after 1 week. And it wasn't even a full week, for Pete's sakes. It was 3 games. So don't move Jokic. And if you are interested, let me know, because I'll take him anytime. So moving on to week 2, we're going to touch base on some streamers. So in situations where you have a daily schedule of 6 games or less, you're going to have opportunities in 9-cat leagues. If you leave a roster spot to stream, essentially that's picking somebody up off the waiver wire to get you points as opposed to just coming up with a goose egg for the day. We're going to go over each of the days in which we have 6 or less games and kind of give you our takes on who we think would be a good stream pickup option for that week. So Monday we have 8 games, so you should have enough play on your roster, so that'll be 16 teams for you to have a full active roster. Tuesday, however, we do have 4 games. So we have Detroit versus Washington. I'm taking Amadou Diallo from Detroit and Will Barton from Washington. We have Golden State versus Phoenix. I'm taking JaMychal Green and Cameron Payne. We have Dallas versus New Orleans. I'm taking Tim Hardaway from Dallas and Jackson Hayes from New Orleans, especially with the injury to Zion, if they end up kind of letting him rest and understanding the big picture. Then you have the Clippers and OKC. I've got Nicholas Batum. Anytime you have the Clippers, with the probability of, especially if you're playing a low-level squad like OKC, there really isn't going to be an incentive to play Paul George heavy minutes or Kawhi Leonard at all. So definitely look to pick up Batum. He plugs a lot of holes, especially since he plays backup center at times for Zubac as well. So, and then I'm taking Trey Mann from OKC. Wednesday, there are 10 games on the slate, so you should be fine. That's 20 teams playing. Thursday, we're back to 4 games. So we've got Dallas versus Brooklyn. I'm taking Maxi Kleber for Dallas in this game just because Brooklyn is so undersized. So he stretches the floor. He can give you threes if he needs to play back to the basket, if Speedy Claxton gets in foul trouble. Then we got Royce O'Neal from Brooklyn. Then we have Memphis at Sacramento. I got John Concar, so I love saying his name. Some people say Concar. I like to say it like a conquistador. I'm taking him. As of yesterday, he was one of the highest adds in Yahoo Fantasy, but he was also one of the highest drops in Yahoo Fantasy, so he's literally the 50-50 coin, but that's what I'm taking against the Kings. I'm taking Rashawn Holmes from the Kings. Surprisingly, he's still on the waiver wire, which is just shocking to me. So I'm taking Rashawn Holmes. I'm taking Nicholas Batum and Trey Mann again. The Clippers are at OKC. It's odd how the schedule is stacked up for some of these squads right out of the gate. OKC gets a lot of playoff squads up front. So I'm taking Batum and Trey Mann. And then we've got Miami at Golden State. I'm taking Omar Yurtseven. Now, there's questions as to whether or not he's going to be sitting. You might want to keep an eye on the injury report for him, but he could really exploit some of Golden State's issues from a size perspective. And then I'm taking JaMychal Green, and that'll probably be consistent throughout the season for Golden State. This is a guy who, he's just been kind of floating out there. Rudy Gay is a guy like that in Utah, where he's a little long in the tooth. And, savvy fantasy players may have picked him up later in rounds, but you can still find him on the wire in many leagues. Friday, there's 11 games, so 22 teams. Definitely not looking at a streamer on that day. Saturday, we're at 7 games, and Sunday, we're at 8 games. So you guys should be good. But those are our streamers for the week. So that more or less wraps up week 1 recap and kind of gives you an idea what we'd be looking at for week 2 streamers. We're going to go into more detail with our rosters and looking ahead on our Thursday show, so don't forget to miss that. Again, wherever you get your podcast, every Thursday we have new episodes, and then on Mondays we do our recaps. Again, follow us on socials, Twitter, _FB pod, same thing for Instagram. And we look forward to continuing to engage with you. If there's anything you'd like to see on the show, suggestions you might have, make sure you hit us up on social, and we'll definitely be listening to that. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode up, and we will talk to you guys on Thursday.